Hi everyone, this is a Know Your Rights presentation that is on the process for temporary protected status, also known as TPS applications. This presentation is a part of our immigrant justice project. And for context, CARE Washington is a civil rights and advocacy organization serving Muslim individuals, families, and communities in Washington state. CARE Washington's Immigrant Justice Project team is focused on providing legal representation for newly arrived Afghans in Washington state. And I'm Angelique Rodriguez. I'm the policy assistant. And today I'm here with my colleague Alex. And today we're just talking about temporary protected status to just kind of try and demystify this complicated process. And yeah, so I'll just open the floor for Alex and introductions.
Thank you, Angelique. Again, I'm Alex. I'm one of the staff attorneys here at CARE. I've been an immigration attorney for close to a decade now, and looking forward to talking about this issue.
Perfect. So we'll just open the slides now. And so we can go to the next slide. And so in this presentation, we want to talk about basically what temporary protected status is, and then how does this help the newly arrived Afghan community? CARE Washington, a lot of our focus is, or a lot of our work is focused on supporting newly arrived Afghans in Washington state. So we're adding a little extra specificity on how TPS affects the Afghan community. However, we are talking about the process, TPS process in general. So it's general and specific. And then the next thing we're going to be talking about is what is the process for applying for TPS?
So first of all, let's talk about this, what TPS is. It's obviously a temporary form of status, as stated in the name. It's granted by the Department of Homeland Security, which chooses specific countries, and people from those countries can apply for TPS at a given time. It's essentially always in response to some crisis going on in the country, oftentimes a natural disaster or a civil conflict of some kind. Although it's not to say that every country in the world experiencing these types of issues will be designated as a TPS country. There are some policy and political determinations, of course, behind the scenes about which countries are designated for TPS. But in any case, it's typically granted for 18 months at a time. And the procedure is to fill out Form I-821 and provide supporting documentation along with that form. It again is a temporary form of status, so it's not a long-term immigration solution, but it is something that you can apply for and protect yourself by getting that status while you seek some other type of immigration status. For example, an asylum case, if you're afraid to return to your country, but you want extra protection from TPS in the meantime. Well, I should say that it wouldn't be entirely necessary in that situation to apply for TPS, but there are some potential benefits to doing so that you might discuss with your lawyer. It could be that you are going to be seeking a family-based immigration visa or green card at some point, but you need protection in the meantime until you become eligible. It could be that you are going to seek some other form of status that's not permanent, such as a student visa. And so there are various situations where you might find yourself benefiting from TPS if you're eligible. So let's move on to the next slide here. The benefits of TPS, just to go through a general list here, are that if you get TPS status, you are not removable from the U.S. Again, I think we probably all know that the word removable means deportable. It's the supposedly sanitized version that the Department of Homeland Security likes to use, but it means being removed means being deported. And so if you apply for TPS, if you're eligible for it, and you receive it, that will protect you from deportation proceedings as long as you don't violate the terms of your TPS status, which typically include not receiving any criminal convictions that would make you independently deportable. You can also apply for a work permit or employment authorization while you're on TPS. This is a big reason to apply for TPS for many people. You can generally apply for a work permit with many types of pending immigration applications, but the timeline about when you can do it and when you will receive it is complex and case specific. And so there are many situations where you may want to apply for TPS simply to get the work permit sooner. You can apply for travel authorization with TPS. So if you are in the country without status, or if your status has expired and you leave the country, typically you would not be able to come back. Depending on how long you've been in the country without status, you may not be able to come back to the US for a very long time, like more than 10 years, no matter what kind of immigration case you may have. So one major benefit of having TPS is that you can apply for travel authorization to temporarily leave the country and come back without being barred from re-entering the country in the normal way that you would if you didn't have TPS. I will mention here, I almost hesitate to mention this because this is something that changes a lot with various Homeland Security policies and different administrations and case law, judicial decisions and whatnot. But and I would have to double check the current status of this issue. But there have been times when traveling outside of the country and re-entering on the travel authorization that you get from TPS can constitute a new lawful entry into the US for the purpose of applying for a green card. And this is slightly outside of the scope of our conversation, but just to explain a little bit what that means, if you marry someone and apply for a green card on that basis, or if you're a family member of someone who's petitioned for you, one of the requirements of getting a green card in that situation is a lawful entry into the US. Entering without inspection through the border will not be a lawful entry. You won't be able to get a green card in that situation without some kind of waiver, which is difficult to get. So there have been times, and this again changes with the legal landscape, with new decisions and whatnot from judges. But there have been times when leaving the country and re-entering on TPS can be a lawful entry for the purpose of getting your green card. And then I think I should just clarify here that when I'm talking about getting travel authorization to leave the country and come back, this is a permission to re-enter the country. This is not a substitute for a passport. So you would still have to have a passport or some other travel document to travel on and enter the other country you want to travel to. We're just talking about permission to re-enter the US. I think we can move on to the next slide here. We talked a little bit about this before, but the purpose of TPS is to give people the chance to remain in the US when there is some type of emergency or crisis in the country where they're coming from that makes it very dangerous for them to come back. We usually see TPS granted when there's a natural disaster occurring in that country, or when there's an extremely violent conflict or dangerous political situation. That is very, what would be the word? That is not applied across the board. As I said, there are policy determinations, there are political determinations made largely behind the scenes about which countries to designate as TPS countries. So many countries that are experiencing violent conflict and would be very dangerous for people to return to are not designated for TPS. Others are. And so basically you just have to monitor the news and the Homeland Security notifications about whether your country has been designated as such and whether you can apply for TPS. In general, and we're going to repeat this probably throughout this presentation, but in general, you really want to talk to a lawyer or someone helping you with your case to ensure that it's worthwhile for you to apply for TPS Uh, there are situations where it may be quite valuable to you. There are situations where it may not be. So I think we can move on to the next slide here.
Katie, do you mind going back one? Thank you. So TPS eligibility for Afghans. TPS has been granted to citizens and nationals of Afghanistan as well as their children. It was originally designated May 20th of 2022, but it has now been redesignated and or like extended. So it's been extended through May 20th, 2025. So registration period for new applicants or applicants that didn't apply for TPS during the initial like during the time it was initially designated, which was May 20th of 2022, that period is going to be for oh god, okay, sorry guys, I might just like redo this. Okay, I'm gonna take 2 seconds. Okay, so TPS eligibility for Afghans. So TPS has been granted for Afghan nationals, citizens of Afghanistan as well as their children. So it was originally designated May 20th of 2022, but it has now been re-designated. So that means it's going to be through May 20th, 2025. The registration period for new applicants will be September 25th, 2023 through November 24th, 2023. And then the registration period for renewing TPS is going to be September 25th, 2023 through May 20th, 2025. And this requires continuous residence in the US since like September 20th, 2023. And yeah, I think that's basically what we have for that slide.
So we'll make just a few more comments here on specific benefits that could apply to members of the newly arrived Afghan community. So most of the people who arrived from Afghanistan after the evacuation, or I should say as part of the evacuation, arrived on what was called humanitarian parole. That's a permission to enter the U.S. without status. It's not technically a kind of legal status, although it did enable people to get work permits, and it has actually been extended. So in many cases, people who arrived as part of that evacuation on parole are still covered under parole and may not, largely they may not need to seek TPS. But there are some people for whom it would make a lot of sense. And so, those people will want to check with their legal provider to talk through their options. But in general, we should say that the parole will not last forever. So it has been recently extended. It will expire eventually. It's been extended now for another 2 years, but when that ends, it may not be extended, and all of those people who came as part of the evacuation will have to have some kind of long-term status, like an asylum grant or a pending asylum application, perhaps, if it hasn't been granted yet, or a green card application based on some family relationship or based on special immigrant visa application. And so some of the cases that I just mentioned can actually take many years to reach a decision. And so while they are waiting for decisions on those types of cases, it could make sense on a case-by-case basis to apply for TPS so that they do have a kind of legal status in the meantime while they're waiting for those decisions. We'll also make the point that there may be situations where people want to travel and come back. So we talked about that a little while ago in this talk, but for people who are waiting for some other kind of decision to come through, they do want to think about the pros and cons of traveling and potentially protect themselves. Make sure that they are going to be allowed to re-enter the country, like if they need to go visit family somewhere. Quite often, Well, if someone has a pending green card application or a pending asylum application, they, in most cases, would need to seek travel authorization in connection to those pending cases. But there may be specific situations where applying for TPS for that purpose uh, could make sense. This is something, again, you really need to talk to your lawyer or your legal service provider about and dig into the specific details of your situation. Uh, we'll repeat again that TPS allows you to apply for a work permit. So in case there are people who are who don't have other means of seeking a work permit, especially after the parole status expires, then TPS could make sense. TPS also allows people to get certain benefits here in Washington. A lot of people who are part of this community do have access to social services, but they have to have a valid status in order to receive those services, and that will vary state by state. But generally, I'm guessing that's the situation in most states that are offering services. So TPS would be a form of status you could have to seek social services. And finally, I'll just mention that there may be people who are part of the evacuation who are not intending to stay here permanently, who may eventually want to join family members in some other part of the world. And in the meantime, while they wait for those uh, processes to complete, they may want to seek TPS to remain in a valid status here, to remain able to work and whatnot. So I think we can move on to the next slide now.
Perfect. So in regard to USCIS processing times, while waiting for USCIS to process your applications, you may lose status due to delays in processing times. So because of this, you are encouraged to apply for TPS to like maintain work permits. So other options to avoid losing the ability to work would be 150 days after applying for asylum, you can apply for a work permit as an asylum applicant. However, this does not give you legal status to remain. It simply gives you the right to work while your case is processing. So in short, you are encouraged to apply for TPS.
Moving on to the next slide, we'll just say we'll just make a couple comments about a work permit. Probably we don't need to go into too much detail, and Angelique has actually discussed a little bit of this with the last slide, but a work permit just means legal authorization to work in the US. In immigration, the official name is an employment authorization document, or EAD. You can apply for a work permit in connection to various types of cases and types of status. TPS is one of them. As Angelique mentioned, a pending asylum claim is another type of situation in which you can apply for an EAD, as well as a pending application for lawful permanent resident status, which is the technical term for a green card. So a work permit provides you with the right to work anywhere in the U.S. Obviously, employers have their own criteria for different jobs, but it is an immigration, an EAD connection to an immigration case gives you full access to the job marketplace anywhere in the U.S. You also will get a social security number and social security card issued with that EAD if you don't have one already. In most cases, if we're talking about people who are part of the evacuation from Afghanistan, they probably already do have social security numbers. And if you already have one, you won't be issued a new one. Generally, you have one social security number for your entire life. But if you don't have one yet, then you can actually request one as part of the EAD application. And then I'll also just mention that employment authorization documents can be used as photo ID. It's an ID card that meets all of the real ID standards under the law. So it's actually you could call it a more powerful or more widely accepted form of ID than most state IDs. Well, maybe not most, but actually more than the Washington state ID, for example. So a lot of people benefit from having that card simply as a form of photo ID. We can move on to the next slide. We'll just mention a few more things to be aware of when filing for TPS. So number one, there are specific application guidelines for each country. So if you come from a country that's been designated as a TPS country, you want to go to the TPS website, and there's a list of all the countries, and you'll actually follow the link uh, for your country, and there will be some specific guidelines about fees and what you need to attach to your application. uh, as far as I'm aware, you'll still fill out the same application form for each country, but there are some uh, small differences for each type of application, including where you file the application form. Uh, I'll note also that it's, in my observation, when Homeland Security announces there's been a new TPS designation for a new country, they generally make that announcement before they've actually updated the website for the application. So people will go to that website and look for the country specific application and not find anything there for a couple of weeks. And that's just been my observation the last few times around. Hopefully it won't be like that going forward. It does cost some money to apply. There are government filing fees for these applications. They're generally not the highest fees compared to other immigration applications, but there is some fee required. You can apply for a fee waiver based on economic hardship or based on some other reason. That's a separate application. There is a fee waiver application that you would fill out that is, there's one single application that's applicable to all types of immigration cases. And then you specify which type of immigration application you'd like the fee waived for on the application and give your reasons and your supporting documentation. So if you do want to have the fee waived, just know that you will have to attach that separate form to the TPS application and apply by mail. And then USCIS will first adjudicate the fee waiver application. If they grant it, they will proceed to the TPS application. If they don't grant it, they will send the whole packet back to you and you'll have to reapply for TPS with the fee. Alternatively, if you're not seeking a fee waiver, you can simply apply to TPS online. There's a you know online system for filing many types of immigration applications. It's sort of a work in progress. It they're making constant improvements. It's not always the most easy interface to deal with, but I do see it improving over time. So that's probably the easiest and fastest way to apply for TPS if you're not seeking for the fee to be waived. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Angelique for any closing comments, but I personally would like to thank you for your time watching this presentation.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, so be sure to, we hope that this was helpful. Again, we understand that immigration is very complicated. And so really the purpose of presentations like this is just to demystify the process. And so if you enjoyed this or if you want to learn more, please be sure to check out our Know Your Rights website and our Instagram and things of that sort. So I just want to say thank you to Alex for your time and Katie as well. And yeah, and thank you for watching.